Hi, everyone. I'm really pleased that you decided to join me to take a look at U.S. history. We try to take a look at U.S. history from a variety of different angles, try to identify the story behind the story. Sometimes we try to look at the odd things that have happened, and certainly examine the personalities that have made the American experience so unique in all the history of the world. In particular, we take a look at the U.S. Constitution, this wonderful document that has governed this country for well over 200 years. And we try to understand some of the complications and some of the problems that we face as a nation, day by day, year by year, month by month. In any event, I hope you're enjoying this and that you come back often, because I will keep repeating these and posting them to YouTube so that you can relive the experience if you want to do it more than once. And I hope you do. Anyway, welcome and enjoy the presentation. Taking a look at today, and you hear again the cash register, which is telling you that it's a money underlying issue. We're going to look at factions, interest groups, and lobbying, good or bad for democracy. You think about this as we move through the various points I'm going to make. Constitutional issues, there are some behind it. The founders were much worried about common interest groups, which they referred to as factions. James Madison, the most important author of the Constitution, he talked about the many provisions of mischiefs of faction. So again, you heard me recommend Federalist number 10. Federalist number 10 by James Madison addresses the question of how to reconcile the interests of citizens contrary to the rights of others or inimical to the interests of the community as a whole. Madison saw factions as inevitable due to the nature of man. That is, as long as people hold differing opinions, have differing amounts of wealth, and own differing amounts of property, they will continue to form alliances with people who are most similar to them, and they will sometimes work against the public interest and infringe upon the rights of others. And he thus questions how to guard against these dangers. Federalist number 10 continues a theme that was initiated in Federalist number 9, dealing with the utility of the Union as a safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection. The whole series is cited by scholars and jurists as an authoritative interpretation and explication of the meaning, explication of the meaning of the Constitution. Historians argue that number 10 shows an explicit rejection by the founding fathers of the principles of direct democracy. That's important to understand about our American system. It is not intended to have direct democracy. And factionalism and argument Madison suggests that a representative republic is more effective against partisanship and factionalism because you have a barrier between you and some of the interests that are at work.
Could I ask you, what would direct democracy be? I don't want to interrupt you.
Direct democracy would be one, for example, where everybody votes on every issue. Okay. And it's not practical for everybody to vote on every issue. Therefore, you have various forms of representative government. And once you have representative government, you basically have a republic rather than a democracy, a pure democracy. Okay, makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
You
So,
have a question?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's all right. All questions are appropriate. I'm glad to have them and talk about any issue that comes up, because that's what makes this more interesting. So come on in. Come on in, join us. Okay. So anyway, the interest groups in past and present and so forth. So let's see where I am here. The word lobby, which is often used in connection with interest groups, derives from an old High German word called Luba, meaning hall or roof. It used to be used in the 18th century British theaters, where the box lobby lounger became a common sight. It was someone who came to not to see the play, but to chat with the well-connected Londoners streaming through the lobby just outside of their box seats. The first lobby in the US Capitol was where people came to bend the ear of a representative, and it still physically works about the same way. The switch to the political use of the term lobby began in the 1810s in the northeastern legislatures in the US, Connecticut and Massachusetts and so forth. Interest groups, organizations outside of the government that attempt to influence the government's behavior, decision-making, and allocation of resources. Politicians and media often use the term special interests in a pejorative way. What makes an interest group a special one? The answer is highly subjective. One person's special interest is another one's public interest. The term special interest conveys a selfish or narrow view, one that may lack credibility. For this reason, we use the neutral term interest groups. Ideas and information. This was the original idea behind lobbying, is still important to legislators who take their responsibilities seriously, but it does not make the lobbyist powerful, merely useful. No one elected in a representative form of government knows everything they need to know about every possible topic. Therefore, a good lobbyist provides really honest and necessary kinds of information that people will need in order to help them make proper decisions on subjects they may know little or less than they should about. And so it has a useful, it's a very useful kind of a thing and a necessary thing in the process. Any person or institution that represents a large number of voters or can influence a large number of voters will have power relative to Congress, just as the people have power relative to Congress through their electing them. Money, 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 money. Any person or institution that can contribute substantial amounts of money to the congressman personally or to his reelection campaign or represents people who can contribute money will have power. Publicity, any person or institution that can provide good or bad publicity about a member of Congress helping or harming his own power and reelection prospects. And the one thing everybody in elective office wants to do is to get themselves reelected. So we have the politicians sitting there taking all kinds of, accepting all kinds of things, candy and flowers, but more often than not, money one way or the other. And so lobbyists are both good and other way. This is a triangle that's a little complicated, and it's called the iron triangle. And this shows how the interests of Congress and the interest groups and bureaucracies influence one another. And it goes, all of them have one level of influence upon the other. Now, I'm going to show you a little video that explains it, I think, rather better than this diagram, which you'll frequently see in government books.
An iron triangle is defined as the three-way alliance among legislators, bureaucrats, and interest groups to make or preserve policies that benefit their respective interests. The bureaucracy's policymaking role has often been depicted by what traditionally has been called the iron triangle, a three-way alliance among legislators in Congress, bureaucrats, and interest groups. Iron triangles are also referred to as subgovernments. Presumably, the laws that are passed and the policies that are established benefit the interest of all three sides of the iron triangle. At one corner, interest groups and their lobbyists can influence congressional votes in their favor by providing campaign contributions and a constituency that will offer electoral support for congresspersons who back their programs. Interest groups also provide industry-specific information to Congress when they are researching and considering legislation. In the next corner, these Congress members serve on committees and subcommittees that make decisions about a particular field. They determine the budgets and jurisdictions of the executive agencies and regulatory commissions that work in the field. And in this third corner, these bureaucratic departments set regulations and award contracts in this field. The bureaucracy is often pressured by the same powerful interest groups. It also receives its funding and political assistance from the Congress members who rely on these interest groups' re-election support. Therefore, the bureaucracy often adopts regulations that are favorable to the industry's interests. The Iron Triangle's benefits to these three groups works both ways. In seeking to align themselves with the constituency for political support, Congress often passes favorable legislation and grants friendly oversight of the federal agencies involved with the interest groups. The interest groups gain congressional support for the bureaucracy's programs and budget requests through their lobbyists. They also provide information about the industry. And the bureaucracy makes policy choices that will win the favor of Congress's constituency within the interest group. They can also help Congress members with their constituency's complaints. This flow of benefits for all three corners, if each corner works in this manner, results in a three-way symbiotic alliance.
And can you see how it can be abused? Any one of the three can overuse their particular aspect. Now, social movements, a large body of people who are interested in a common issue, idea, or concern that is of continuing significance and are willing to take action to support or oppose it. Interest groups sometimes begin as movements. Social movements represent groups that has felt unrepresented by government. They might be racial, they might be religious, they might be social, they might be, for example, a group of gay Americans. They might be a group of pro or anti-abortion Americans. Examples of social movements include the civil rights, environmental, anti-tax, animal rights, women's rights, Christian right, gay rights, anti-immigration, and anti-war movements. In some respects, the Tea Party groups that formed in 2009 and 10 are examples of social movements. They, like other social movements, represent a group that has felt unrepresented by government, and they morphed, if you would. You understand morphing as one translates into another, into the MAGA group that has been following the immediate past president. I hope you appreciate my language, Tomcat. How do social movements differ from interest groups? Interest groups usually work within government and use lobbying to achieve their goals. Movements seek to change attitudes or institutions, not just policies. Social movements often arise at the grassroots level and spread throughout the nation. As movements mature, they develop interest groups that pursue public policies. The Bill of Rights protects movements, popular or unpopular, by supporting free assembly, free speech, and due process. Probably the most important part of the Bill of Rights. The Constitution envisions a plurality of groups competing with each other, an idea that has been called pluralism. We've got all of these thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of groups that all have interests, and they all are working in trying to make sure their cause or their idea is advanced. Economic, I'm talking about some kinds of interest groups that there are. Economic interest groups, business, such as large corporations, including multinationals, trade and other associations, businesses with similar interests joined together as associations, which are as diverse as the product and services they provide. Labor is an economic interest. Workers' associations with shared interests ranging from professional standards to wage and working conditions, like the American Farm Bureau Federation, the United Farm Workers, the AFL-CIO. In the union area, there are open shops where union membership cannot be required, closed shop where union membership can be required, and they're free riders, individuals not in the union, but who benefit from the union activity. I have to admit, this was me when my school I was teaching at decided it wanted to unionize, and I objected at that point to the union, and so I did not join the union. And therefore, when they did gain benefits, I gained the benefits, which is really not fair, but that is a reality. You'll always have some people who do that. Types of interest groups continued. You have economic interests continued. Professional associations, and there are a lot of them. American Medical Association, the American Bar Association, the Federation of Teachers, the American Realtors, et cetera, et cetera. And you have ideological or single issue interest groups. For example, the ACLU, the Common Cause. You have public interest groups seek to influence policy on Capitol Hill and several state legislatures on things like environmental issues and safe energy and consumer protection. Still other foreign policy interest groups, Council on Foreign Relations, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, like Greenpeace, Amnesty International, the Humane Society of the United States. Government and government employee organizations. And did you know that over 20% of our population is employed in government? Over 20% of our 330 million or so people are employed by one level or the other of government. So governments are themselves important interest groups, and they do lobby in Congress, in the legislative bodies. Government employees form a large and they're well organized. Public employees are increasingly important to organized labor because they constitute in recent time the most rapidly growing unions. Other interest groups like veterans groups, nationality groups, religious organizations, environmental groups, the list goes on and on and on and on. And then you have single interest groups. The Christian Coalition, which really didn't exist until about 1980 or so, distributes voter guides before elections as one means of influencing politics. They put out 70 million of these flyers before the 2020 election. Do you think they had influence on people? Of course they did, because most people don't think that deeply about the choices they're going to make when they get in the voting booth. And so here you have, in this case, it was Donald Trump against Joe Biden. Forgive me, Tomcat, I had to say it. And then you have a couple of other organizations of interest, the National Rifle Association, which has 5.5 million people, and they act, they respond, they do things, they write letters, they talk to their representatives and so forth. And then one we don't maybe think so much about, but the AARP, the American Association of Retired People, the nation's most powerful interest group, some would say. They have 38 million members, and they offer a wide array of material benefits like their insurance and magazines, and they are, in fact, one of the most influential groups in Washington, D.C. And one of the reasons why you may hear somebody talk about removing Social Security ain't going to happen. No, it's just not going to happen. So when all is said and done for lobbying and interest groups, you have to follow the money. It's all greatly influenced by dollars. Or maybe it isn't. The list of the top 20 in the year, top 20 political expenditures in 2020. It totaled $455 million that you see here, just among the top 20. And that has nothing to do with the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds other billions of dollars are spent on public interest groups, on interest groups rather, and on lobbying.
What's the very top one?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's hard to see, but that is the National Association of Realtors and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Now, these two switch around from time to time. In this particular year, that's how they rank. Now, let me show you a little bit more in detail, because I think this is interesting. When you take those apart, among those top 20, here was the top two, and this is in 2020, were both business-related organizations. And if you throw in the Business Roundtable, you see a lot proportionately goes to them. And the part I thought was most interesting here is that other than Facebook, medical community of one kind or another has a tremendous influence on the whole process. And here are the next 10, and also huge amounts of money, just showing that billions of dollars goes into lobbying one way or the other. And then I was showing, this is January 2010 to December 2016. And it was the US Chamber, always one of the big spenders, 130 million in that period. But I thought it was interesting, the NRA here, the National Rifle Association, at 58 million. And the thing that's significant about them is they are passionate, they work, they actually advocate and do things on behalf of their cause. Oh, you all remember this guy, Ralph Nader, who ran for president as the Green Party candidate 3 times, 96, 2000, and 2004. Now he's an 88-year-old man and kind of semi-forgotten, but his influence was that he received almost 100,000 votes in 2000. Now, if you think about 1,000 or 100,000 votes being siphoned off of somewhere, probably disproportionately from Gore, Gore would probably have been elected if it had not been for Ralph Nader. In a 2003 study, found that Nader's candidacy was a critical factor in Bush's victory. Probably played an important role in 2004 as well, which is the only time that the Republicans have won the presidency voter-wise since 1998. So anyway, foreign policy interest groups, Council on Foreign Relations, American Israel Political Action Committee, public sector interest groups, the National Governors Association. Yes, you wouldn't think of the governors having their own association that's very powerful, but it is. And they train the governors on how to be governor. And I know that because I was at one of their sessions where they were teaching us how to be governors. And I had one idea that I proposed that came out of that, which we did in Minnesota. We had what is called a Capital for a Day program, where we moved out to the small cities of Minnesota and we took all the commissioners out there, and it was the capital of the state for at least one day. And it was good public relations and it was good government too. Here are the other interest groups, some environmental groups, and how they do business. Each of them operate differently. When you take Greenpeace USA, it doesn't lobby. It doesn't lobby the government. It does media events and mass mailings and so forth. National Resources Defense Council, they deal with a lot of litigation, among other things. The Sierra Club, they have news releases and grassroots action and litigation again, and the Wilderness Society, which has scientific studies and analysis. So they have facts that they present to advocate for their cause. Other categories, and I'm just going to run through these categories very quickly, but there are tens of thousands and many thousands under each one of these categories: business, trade, professional, union, agricultural, women, public interest, ideological, single item, religious, civil rights, age-related, veterans, environmental, defense, government, and others I may not have even thought of in the listing. Collective action refers to how groups form and organize to pursue their goals or objectives, including how to get individuals and groups to participate and cooperate. Public choice, synonymous with collective action. Public choice specifically studies how government officials, politicians, and voters respond to positive and negative incentives. Size and resources, incentive to participate. There's a cohesiveness that they have as part of all of these organizations. Inspirational leadership can be instrumental in building the membership. Somebody who understands, how to get people to follow them just based on their ability to give speeches and to advocate. Many of the religious leaders do this sort of thing very effectively. Different techniques: publicity, mass media mailing, mass mailings, direct contact with the government, and then dealing with the Federal Register, where an official document every weekday it's published. Organized groups can readily access that. Litigation. Sometimes they just file amicus curiae, friends of the court briefs, filed by an individual organization to present arguments that are supportive of somebody else's point of view. Election activities, forming even a political party like Ralph Nader did. Cooperative lobbying, protest, candidate support. And when you're running for office, you want all kinds of support that you can get. And so you make alliances and friendships and so forth with a wide, diverse group of people. Resources can be used to provide selective benefits, which can be used to overcome organizational barriers. Some people may join AARP and they don't care about the issues it's advocating for, but it provides insurance benefits. And so they join it for that. Material benefits, solidarity benefits, purposeful benefits. And how about it? How cohesive is it? Now, there are different people who belong to these organizations. There are a small number of formal members, the leaders, the passionate ones, the ones who take the cause, the ones who work and are sometimes, often, in fact, are employed, salaried employees. And then there are people who are intensely involved as volunteers with the group. And then more often, there are a lot of people who are members in name only. But the fact that they are name only and they've made a contribution gives some money for the others who are working to actually do the job that they intend to accomplish. Here are a couple of profiles of big names today. Randy Weingarten, president of the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. Recently, she's been very much quoted and doing a number of things, but a very powerful organization and a powerful person herself. Derek Johnson, he's the head of the NAACP, and whoever heads the NAACP is automatically powerful. It is the most, I think, most powerful advocate for African Americans in our society. And it isn't only African Americans. People can belong to the NAACP who are white. I belonged at one time when I was in office. Other techniques: testifying at legislative hearings, contacting government officials directly, helping to draft legislation. Sometimes you don't know how to write the law that you want to propose, so people will help with that. They alert legislators to the effect on their district. How is this going to affect the people off in my little town in the backwoods where I have to serve these people? Having influential constituents contact, maybe the lobbyists themselves is not influential, but their buddy back home will do the job. When Harry Truman was considering whether to recognize Israel, he had as a partner in his hat store back in Independence, Missouri, who was a Jew. And that man came in the back door of the White House, and it is speculated that it is his influence that allowed Harry Truman to recognize Israel. So sometimes that works very well. Consulting with government officials to plan legislative strategy, so forth. There are lots of mounting grassroots lobbying, helping to draft rules and regulations, raising new issues and calling attention to previously ignored problems, engaging informal contacts, inspired letter writing, and so forth. There are lots of them and more here. Entering into coalitions with other groups, talking to the media, serving on advisory commissions and boards, making monetary contributions, doing favors for people, filing suit, working on election campaigns, endorsing candidates, running advertisements, engaging in protests or demonstrations. Here we have back to our iron triangle. So who are the lobbyists themselves? They're the people who are employed to get this job done, often with big dollars that are paid. They engage in activities aimed at influencing public officials, especially legislators, in the policies that they enact. They provide money for campaigns. And sometimes it looks like this: I have nothing to hide. That's because they all are money. So the influence. Who are the lobbyists? They are former public servants, people who have served in office and then now they're out of office, but they understand how it works. So they've got buddies who are still back there and they're very influential, experienced in government. A lot of them are lawyers. They go to work for one of the interests and so forth. What do? They participate in issue networks and relationships and so forth. And it's just, it's an incestuous kind of a relationship. Interest groups provide money for incumbents. They provide information. So they sometimes attempt to influence by going directly to the people and urging them to contact officials. Interest groups seek to influence politics by spending money in many ways, for election campaigns, to political parties, to other interest groups, to the members of their group, including employees. Notice how often I'm using the word money. Money, 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 money. The growth of political action committees, a political arm of an interest group that's legally entitled to raise funds on a voluntary basis. Types of PACs, corporations, trade and health organizations, labor unions, ideological organizations. Political action committees, more recently elected officials have begun to form their own PACs called leadership PACs. formed by an office holder who collects contributions from individuals and other PACs and then makes contributions to other candidates and political parties. Do you understand the difference between three kinds of money? There is soft money, there is hard money, and there is dark money. There is hard money is the easiest to understand. That's when I'm candidate A and you write a check to me, candidate A. That's hard money. Goes directly from one person to the other, very regulated. I'll show you a limitation in a minute of some, their dollar limitation. Soft money is when I don't do that. I contribute to an organization which then supports you. Sometimes they don't even engage in direct advertising. What they will do is they will simply paint a picture where you can draw your own conclusions about who is evil and who is good. And then there is dark money. Dark money is when we don't know where it came from, but it enters the political system. And we have all kinds of that going on. So here is a little bit interesting. This is way back, this is 2008, but it's just interesting because it shows a breakdown as to who contributes to what kind of party. And you'll see one down here, the machinists, the aerospace workers, 97% of what they contributed went to Democrats, only 3% went to Republicans. But most of the rest of them, for example, the National Association of Realtors, 59 to 41, they kind of go both ways. They contribute to both parties in thinking they're just going to hedge their bets. The National Beer Wholesalers Association, 52-48. Congressional candidates. The significance of this bar shows over on the left, you see the blue bars. That's the incumbents and the amount they're getting. The little maroon and then the yellow part next to them are the challengers and the open seats. So they're investing in people who are already there, because most people who are in Congress or in the Senate or wherever get returned to office. We don't really have a lot of competitive seats in this country. We probably have like 60 seats in the House of Representatives that are truly competitive. Political action committees, the law limits the amount of money that PACs like individuals can contribute to any single candidate. We've had all kinds of legislation over time, and I'm not going to get too into that, but you can do all kinds of election. You can go and make a presentation on behalf of a candidate by persuading their employees, members, or stockholders to vote in a consistent way. And it's very subtle, a lot of it. Until 2004, interest groups and individuals could avoid the contributions limitation to political parties by contributing the soft money. It's raised in unlimited amounts. Issue ads, they can have issue ads that are put on, and you can just draw your own inference as to who they're supporting and who they're not favoring. Other modes here, independent expenditures. The Supreme Court has ruled that individuals, groups, and parties can spend unlimited amounts in campaigns. I think this is unfortunate, but this is what the Supreme Court did a few years ago, as long as they operate independently from the candidates. So they can do all kinds of mischief that way. And a lot of money has done that. They can circumvent disclosure and contribution limits through issue advocacy. Use of an ad that avoids the words vote for or elect, but we're clearly for one candidate or the other. Very subtle wording that they use that sneaks under exactly the intent of the law. Because PACs give more money to incumbents, challengers have difficulty funding their campaigns and have to rely more on individual contributors. Mass membership organizations fail to mobilize their full membership in elections. They can effectively mobilize when their interests are directly attacked. Only a fraction of any candidate's funds come from a single group. It's debatable how much campaign contributions affect the elections. Think about that. It's debatable how much campaign contributions affect elections. There is no guarantee that money produces a payoff in legislation. No guarantee. So you have all of this spent and who knows what difference it makes. I don't know that you really realize how important I am. Do you guys know how important I am? Every day over the past months, I have been getting personal messages from Joe Biden. So, the tendency of PACs to give more money to incumbents means that the challengers have real difficulty getting money. And I love this. This is a quote from former Senator Alan Simpson, one of the most clever, witty men who ever served in the US Senate. He said, "Who, after all, can seriously contend that a $100,000 donation does not alter the way one thinks about and quite possibly votes on an issue?" So regulating lobbying, very difficult to do. Regulating political money. And there are many attempts that have been trying to do this over the years. One going back to 1945, and then you see one here in the 1973, and then one in 1995, the Lobbying Disclosure Act. The campaign finance reforms, one in 1992. And the effects of regulation, there's another one in 2002, limiting soft money and PAC contributions, but they always find a way around it, always find a way to reinterpret or use language and so forth so that it still continues to be corrupted by money if it really makes a difference. If you really are a person of integrity and character, you still go ahead and do what you think is right. And fortunately, most people really operate that way. I remember when I was lieutenant governor, I was working with Al Quie, and he had been in Congress for, I think, 24, 25 years, something like that. And he said in the process of making laws, there are really three stages. There's a stage where a subject comes up, you don't know anything about it. Nobody knows anything about it. It's just something that some group or some movement is beginning to talk about. And then there's a period when you know about the subject, you know it's important, but you haven't made up your mind yet. And so you gather information, you listen to lobbyists and so forth. And then there's the period when your vote and your idea is frozen. And no matter who talks to you at that point, probably can't make a difference. And so you kind of need to know as a lobbyist when you're going to approach somebody and make your point and so forth. This one outlaws the use of soft money. And here you see that contributions per candidate had been increased to 2,300 contributions per national party committee, 38.5. Total contributions in a 2-year cycle, 108,000. Soft money was banned entirely. Well, that's why I said I've been talking about how they found their way around this again and again. But that is the law of the land right now still. 2007, the Honest Leadership and Open Government Act bans gifts, toughens disclosure, increases time limits. The 78 Ethics in Government Act, and here it deals with financial disclosure and employment after government services. You're supposed to wait, I think it's a 1 year after you have left office before you can really begin to lobby. But what you can do, and many do this, is you go down to, I think it's 14th Street in Washington, and you become affiliated with a law firm. You may not directly affiliate, but you're being compensated as a member of the law firm and so forth. And then when you served your time, eventually you meant to make your difference on Capitol Hill. Here are 3 guys who did become lobbyists after serving with Clinton's administration. And it's always questionable. And even though they may themselves operate ethically, it still is an ethical question. So now I'm going to show you a bunch of cartoons, which people have done a lot of cartooning about lobbying and public interest groups. And you notice there's difference here on the left where the TV cameras are rolling and when they're lobbying. And totally different, same position, same ideas, but anyway, lots and lots of different opinions depending upon whose audience you're approaching at that point. This one shows a giant new supermarket for Washington's power elite. Blue light special. You lobbyists don't miss the banking committee, senators on aisle 5 and so forth. And soft, hard 527 media, West Wing contracts, executive, corporate, legislative, anyway, ethics, maybe in the frozen section. In the 1800s, Thomas Nast and Kepler, two very prominent cartoonists of that period, brought down some of the big fat cats. This is a famous cartoon that shows Senate being influenced by the different trusts. On the right is the big fat steel beam trust, the copper trust, the Standard Oil trust. In the background, the nail trust, the sugar trust, and so forth. The trusts were really influencing government. Notice how they are portrayed as big fat cats. The bosses of the Senate, it calls them here. This one is one from WASP, a magazine of the 1900s, which shows again the wolf with all the money circulating around them and so forth. And this is Thomas Nast famously brought down Boss Tweed with his cartooning. And this is one of those that shows, again, influence. And everybody here has a name on them and so forth. It's a very famous cartoon. Again, this is Thomas Nast, and he's a very corrupt leader, Tammany Hall in New York during the 1870s. Another one. The sharp method works with any board of aldermen. Taking boodle. Money was called boodle in those days, and so he's taking boodle and so forth. And this one I think is kind of cute. You signed a special interest group's pledge, did you? And somebody's running away with his brain. And this one says, when we grow up, we should be lobbyists. Perfect. We'll collect and trade congressmen. And this one, we finally done it, America, strongly worded bipartisan lip service to put the lobbies on notice. And there you have the GOP in their pocket of the lobbies and the Democrats in the other pocket, Senate bill to limit gifts from registered lobbyists and so forth. It's just very clever what they do. I love cartoonists. This one is the last one. I couldn't resist. This shows the GOP with its head cleverly stuck up somewhere. And the caption up above says, maybe this wasn't the best strategy for the current election. So anyway, so that is the end. And so I ask then, are your interests being served?